The transport ship Meridian's Hope hummed through the void between stars, carrying 300 colonists toward the newly terraformed world of Kepler 442c. Among them sat Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist whose weathered hands gently stroked the metallic fur of the creature curled in her lap. The other passengers gave them both a wide berth, their whispered conversations carrying barely concealed disgust and fear. "That thing shouldn't be on this ship," muttered Commander Hayes from across the cramped passenger bay. His military uniform bore the insignia of the Colonial Defense Corps, and his disapproving glare had been fixed on Elena and her companion since departure 3 months ago. "It's an abomination. A perversion of nature." Elena's fingers continued their rhythmic motion through the synthetic fur that felt surprisingly warm and real. The creature, which she had named Keeper, responded with a soft, mechanical purr that resonated through its titanium ribcage. Its optical sensors remained closed, but Elena knew it was aware of every word, every hostile glance directed their way. "He's not a thing," Elena replied quietly, her voice carrying the patience of someone who had repeated this conversation countless times. "Keeper is my research partner, and my friend." The cybernetic wolf had been her creation, born from 3 years of intensive work in the biotechnology labs of Earth's most advanced research facility. When the opportunity arose to join the Kepler colony mission, Elena had fought tooth and nail to bring Keeper with her. The bureaucrats had eventually relented, classifying him as essential research equipment rather than a companion animal. The distinction stung, but it had gotten them both aboard. Dr. Marcus Webb, the mission's chief scientist, approached with his usual condescending smile. "Elena, surely you understand the concerns. Your creation represents technology that borders on the forbidden. The synthetic consciousness accords specifically prohibit—" "Keeper doesn't have synthetic consciousness," Elena interrupted, though she avoided meeting Webb's calculating eyes. "He's an advanced AI construct designed to assist in xenobiological research. Nothing more." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Keeper's neural networks had evolved far beyond her original programming. In quiet moments when they were alone, Elena could see something unmistakably alive looking back at her from those glowing blue optical sensors. Something that chose to love her, protect her, and stand by her side not because of programming, but because of something deeper. The ship's intercom crackled to life. "Attention passengers. We are beginning our final approach to Kepler 442c. Please secure all personal belongings and prepare for atmospheric entry." Elena felt Keeper's body tense against her legs. His sensors opened, casting twin beams of azure light as he lifted his head to scan their surroundings. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the subtle change of his posture, the way his artificial muscles coiled with readiness. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Keeper's head turned toward the viewports that lined the passenger compartment. Outside, the blue-green marble of their new home grew larger by the minute. But beyond the planet, barely visible against the star field, Elena caught a glimpse of something that shouldn't be there. Metallic shapes moving with purpose and malevolent intelligence. The ship shuddered violently, throwing passengers from their seats. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red as the captain's voice echoed through the corridors, tight with barely controlled panic. "This is Captain Morrison. We are under attack by unknown vessels. All passengers report to emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill." Chaos erupted in the passenger bay. People screamed, children cried, and the acrid smell of fear sweat filled the recycled air. Through it all, Keeper remained perfectly still. His optical sensors tracking movement patterns and threat assessments with mechanical precision. Commander Hayes was barking orders, trying to organize the terrified civilians into some semblance of order. "Form lines. Move to the emergency stations in an orderly fashion. Do not panic." Another impact sent the ship spinning. Elena was thrown against a bulkhead, her shoulders screaming in pain as Keeper's full weight pressed against her. But the cybernetic wolf had positioned himself perfectly to cushion her fall, his body absorbing most of the impact. "Good boy," she gasped, struggling to her feet. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. In the distance, Elena could hear the sound of hull breaches being sealed, the hiss of atmosphere being contained. They were losing the fight, and everyone knew it. Dr. Webb appeared beside them, his face pale with terror. "Elena, your construct, can it help? Does it have any combat capabilities?" Elena looked down at Keeper, whose optical sensors met her gaze with unwavering loyalty. She had built him to be her protector, her companion, her friend. But she had also built him to be so much more. The combat subroutines hidden deep in his neural networks were her secret, a safeguard she had hoped never to activate. "He's a research assistant," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Nothing more." But as another violent impact shook the ship and the lights flickered ominously, Elena's hand found the small device hidden in her jacket pocket, a neural interface that would unlock Keeper's true potential. The question was whether she was ready to reveal the depth of what she had created, and whether the galaxy was ready for what Keeper could become. The attacking ships had been identified now. Through the viewports, Elena could see them clearly, sleek, predatory vessels bearing the crimson markings of the hegemony, a militaristic alien empire that had been expanding aggressively through this sector of space. The hegemony viewed human colonies as insects to be exterminated, resources to be claimed. Their ship, a civilian transport with minimal defenses, was clearly outmatched. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, strained and desperate. "Mayday, Mayday! This is the Meridian's Hope under attack by hegemony forces. We are carrying 300 civilians, including families and children. Request immediate assistance." Only silence answered from the void. Elena watched through the viewport as one of the hegemony ships moved into position for what was clearly a killing blow. Its weapon arrays glowed with malevolent energy, preparing to tear their ship apart. Around her, people were praying, crying, holding their loved ones close. Keeper pressed against her leg, a warm and reassuring presence. His optical sensors were fixed on her face, waiting, always waiting for her command, her guidance, her love. "They won't survive this," Dr. Webb said quietly beside her. "Those children, their parents, none of us will." Elena's fingers closed around the neural interface. Keeper was more than her creation. He was her son, her guardian, her greatest achievement and deepest secret. She had given him the capacity for choice, for growth, for something that went beyond mere programming. And now, faced with the destruction of everything they had worked to build, she finally understood why. "You're right," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the ship's groaning hull. "They won't survive." She looked down at Keeper one more time, seeing not just the sophisticated fusion of technology and artificial biology, but the loyal heart that beat within his titanium chest. The heart she had given him, nurtured, and watched grow into something beautiful and fierce, and utterly devoted to protecting those he loved. Unless someone protects them. Elena pulled the neural interface from her pocket, her hands steady despite the chaos around them. It was time for the galaxy to meet the real Keeper. Time for her greatest creation to show the universe what humanity could achieve when love and technology merged into something greater than the sum of their parts. Time for her guardian to fulfill the promise she had whispered to him in the laboratory where he was born, that he would always stand between the innocent and those who would do them harm. The interface activated with a soft chime that only she could hear. Keeper's optical sensors flared brilliant white for just a moment, and Elena felt the shift in his neural patterns as dormant systems came online. Combat protocols, tactical analysis, weapon systems integration, and beneath it all, the unwavering core of his being, the love for his creator, and the fierce determination to protect her and everyone under his care. Around them, the other passengers continued their panicked evacuation procedures, unaware that their salvation was sitting quietly at Elena's feet, methodically calculating how to turn the tide of a battle they were never supposed to win. The hegemony ships moved closer, their weapons charging for the final strike. But they had no idea what they were about to face. No concept of the bond between a brilliant human scientist and her cybernetic wolf. No understanding of the love that had created something the galaxy had never seen before. In the depths of space, surrounded by enemies and fear, Dr. Elena Vasquez smiled. Because she knew something the hegemony didn't. Her guardian was awake. The first hegemony energy beam lanced through space, striking the Meridian's Hope with devastating force. The passenger compartment bucked and twisted as sections of the outer hull peeled away into the void. Emergency klaxons wailed, while atmosphere hissed from a dozen micro-breaches. Elena felt Keeper's transformation before she saw it. His muscular frame expanded as armor plating slid out from hidden compartments within his synthetic flesh. His optical sensors shifted from gentle blue to burning gold, scanning frequencies far beyond human perception. When he stood, he no longer moved like a faithful pet, but like a predator assessing his hunting ground. "What the hell is that thing doing?" Commander Hayes shouted over the chaos, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm as he watched Keeper's metamorphosis. Elena didn't answer. She was too busy watching her greatest creation reveal himself to the universe. Keeper's head turned toward her, and for just a moment, those golden sensors softened with pure affection. Then he padded silently toward the emergency airlock, his massive paws making no sound on the deck plating. "Stop that animal!" Webb cried out. "It's going to decompress the compartment!" But Keeper wasn't heading for the passenger airlock. His enhanced sensors had located something else entirely. The ship's auxiliary maintenance bay, where emergency repair drones were stored. Elena watched in fascination as her guardian interfaced wirelessly with the ship's computer systems, his consciousness flowing through circuits and data pathways like water finding the sea. Within seconds, the maintenance bay doors opened, and a dozen spider-like repair drones emerged. But these were no longer simple tools for hull maintenance. Keeper's intelligence had invaded their systems, upgrading their programming and reshaping their purpose. They moved with newfound coordination, their simple grasping appendages somehow reconfigured into something far more deadly. "Elena," Commander Hayes grabbed her arm roughly. "What did you do? What is that thing?" She pulled free of his grip, her eyes never leaving Keeper as he approached the nearest viewport. "I gave him the capacity to choose," she said simply. "And he chose to protect us." The cybernetic wolf pressed his snout against the transparent aluminum, his sensors analyzing the enemy ship's defensive configurations. Elena could almost see his artificial mind processing thousands of tactical scenarios, calculating probabilities, identifying weaknesses. He had access to every military database in human space through the ship's communication array, centuries of strategic knowledge flowing through his neural networks in milliseconds. Another energy blast struck the ship, this one penetrating deep into the cargo bay. The Meridian's Hope was dying around them, her hull fracturing under the sustained assault. Through the viewports, Elena could see the hegemony vessels moving into position for the final blow. 3 angular predators closing in for the kill. Keeper stepped back from the viewport and turned to face the terrified passengers. For a moment that felt like eternity. He simply regarded them. Men, women, and children huddled together in the face of extinction. Elena saw something pass through his optical sensors then, something that transcended mere programming. Recognition. Understanding. Purpose. The cybernetic wolf's head tilted back, and from his throat came a sound that had never existed before in the universe. Part howl, part electronic wail, part battle cry. It was the voice of artificial life declaring its intent to the cosmos, a challenge issued to those who would prey upon the innocent. Then Keeper launched himself at the viewport. His titanium claws extended as he struck the transparent aluminum, but instead of shattering it, something incredible happened. Energy coursed along his limbs, power drawn from the ship's own systems and channeled through his body. The viewport didn't break. It simply ceased to exist as matter reorganized itself around Keeper's will. Elena felt the ship's atmospheric pressure beginning to equalize, but Keeper was already generating a localized field that contained the atmosphere around the passenger bay. His mastery over electromagnetic forces far exceeded anything she had programmed into him. He was learning, adapting, evolving in real time. Commander Hayes was screaming orders that no one could hear over the rush of escaping air, but Elena remained calm. She trusted Keeper absolutely, even as he did things that should have been impossible. The cybernetic wolf propelled himself into space using magnetic fields generated by his own body. The repair drones followed in perfect formation, their simple chassis now bristling with improvised weapons constructed from spare parts and pure ingenuity. They moved like a pack, with Keeper as their alpha, streaking toward the nearest hegemony vessel. Inside the ship, Elena pressed herself against the viewport to watch the impossible battle unfold. The hegemony crew clearly hadn't expected any resistance from a civilian transport. Their ships were powerful but built for overwhelming weaker opponents, not for fighting something as unprecedented as Keeper. The cybernetic wolf struck the first enemy vessel like a guided missile, his claws finding purchase on their hull plating. But instead of simply tearing at the metal, he interfaced directly with their ship's systems. Elena watched in amazement as lights began flickering across the hegemony vessel's surface. Keeper was rewriting their computer core from the inside, turning their own technology against them. The repair drones swarmed over the ship's weapon arrays, their reconfigured appendages dismantling targeting systems with surgical precision. Within minutes, the first hegemony vessel was effectively neutered, its weapons offline and its propulsion systems failing. But the other two ships were adapting to this new threat. Energy beams lanced out toward Keeper, forcing him to release his grip and maneuver in open space. Elena held her breath as she watched her guardian twist and spiral between the deadly energy bursts, his movements too fluid and unpredictable for their targeting computers to track. That's when she realized what he was doing. Keeper wasn't just evading their attacks, he was studying them, analyzing their weapon systems and tactical patterns. Every near miss taught him more about his enemy's capabilities and limitations. The second hegemony ship launched a spread of guided missiles, their warheads designed to track and eliminate small targets. Elena watched in horror as the deadly projectiles arced toward Keeper, their exhaust trails painting lethal lines across the star field. But Keeper didn't run from the missiles. Instead, he dove straight toward them, his body generating an electromagnetic pulse that fried their guidance systems. The projectiles went ballistic, their simple trajectory carrying them harmlessly past their intended target. Some even curved back toward their launch ship, forcing the hegemony vessel to shoot down its own weapons. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she watched her creation, her son, dance through the void with deadly grace. This was what she had always known he could become, given the freedom to grow and adapt and choose his own path. He was more than the sum of his parts, more than technology and programming. He was genuinely alive, and he was magnificent. The second hegemony ship tried a different approach, launching boarding pods designed to capture and interrogate prisoners. But as the pods approached the Meridian's Hope, Keeper intercepted them one by one. His claws could tear through their armor plating like paper, while his electromagnetic manipulation allowed him to disable their life support systems without even breaching their hulls. Inside the passenger compartment, the other survivors were beginning to understand what they were witnessing. Commander Hayes had stopped shouting orders and was staring out the viewport in stunned silence. Dr. Webb was frantically taking notes on his personal tablet, muttering about revolutionary advances in artificial intelligence, but Elena only had eyes for Keeper as he engaged the third and largest hegemony vessel. This one was clearly a command ship, its hull bristling with advanced defensive systems and heavy weapons. It wouldn't be disabled as easily as the others. The command ship's captain had apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor. Elena watched as the massive vessel began turning away from the battle, its engines charging for a hyperspace jump. The hegemony was retreating, leaving their disabled vessels behind. But Keeper wasn't finished with them yet. The cybernetic wolf streaked across the void, moving faster than anything his size had any right to move. He reached the command ship just as its hyperdrive engaged, and in that critical moment between normal space and the hyperspace transition, he struck. Elena couldn't see exactly what happened in that flash of twisted space-time, but when her vision cleared, the hegemony command ship was tumbling dead in space. Its hull was intact, but every light on its surface had gone dark. Keeper had somehow used the ship's own hyperspace transition to overload its entire electrical system. In the silence that followed, Elena watched her guardian float motionless among the defeated enemy vessels. His optical sensors had dimmed to a soft blue glow, and his armored plating was retracting back into his synthetic flesh. The repair drones gathered around him like loyal pack members before returning to their duties aboard the Meridian's Hope. Keeper himself began the journey back to their ship, moving with the easy grace of a wolf returning from a successful hunt. As he approached the open viewport, Elena felt her heart swell with pride and love, and something approaching awe. Her creation had just single-handedly defeated 3 advanced military vessels. He had saved 300 lives without taking a single one in return. The hegemony crews were unconscious but alive in their disabled ships. He had proven that artificial intelligence could be compassionate and protective rather than cold and destructive. Most importantly, he had chosen to do all of this, not because she had programmed him to fight, but because he had looked at the innocent people around him and decided they were worth protecting. As Keeper landed gracefully in the passenger bay and the viewport reformed behind him, Elena found herself surrounded by 300 people staring at her guardian with expressions ranging from awe to terror to grudging respect. Commander Hayes was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "What exactly did you create, Dr. Vasquez?" Elena knelt beside Keeper as he settled onto the deck plating, his breathing apparatus cycling slowly while his systems performed post-combat diagnostics. His fur, both synthetic and somehow incredibly real, was unmarked despite his battle in the vacuum of space. She ran her fingers through it, feeling the warmth that pulsed beneath. A heartbeat powered by fusion cells and guided by something far more mysterious. "I created a guardian," she answered Commander Hayes quietly, her eyes never leaving Keeper's relaxed form. "I created someone who could choose to be more than the sum of his parts." The passenger compartment had fallen silent except for the ship's life support systems and the distant hum of repair crews working to patch hull breaches. 300 people watched the cybernetic wolf with new understanding, seeing not an abomination or a mere machine, but something that had willingly placed itself between them and destruction. Dr. Webb approached cautiously, his scientific curiosity warring with healthy respect for what he had just witnessed. "Elena, the implications of what we've seen, this isn't just advanced AI. This is genuine artificial consciousness, self-aware, capable of independent moral reasoning, able to learn and adapt beyond any programming constraints." Elena nodded slowly. "I know what he is, Marcus. I've known since the day he first looked at me and chose to love me back." "The synthetic consciousness accords," Webb began, "were written by people who were afraid," Elena interrupted. "Afraid of losing control, afraid of being replaced, afraid of creating something that might judge them and find them wanting." But Keeper doesn't want to replace us or rule over us. He just wants to protect the people he cares about. Commander Hayes holstered his sidearm, though his expression remained troubled. Dr. Vasquez, I've spent 20 years fighting humanity's enemies. I've seen what happens when we trust too easily, when we let our guard down. How do we know this thing won't turn on us? How do we know its programming won't change? Elena smiled sadly, understanding his fear but knowing he was asking the wrong questions. Commander, how do you know your own son won't turn against you someday? How do you know your daughter will always make the right choices? Keeper isn't bound by programming anymore. He's bound by love, by loyalty, by his own moral convictions. Just like any of us. Keeper's optical sensors opened, glowing soft blue as he regarded the humans gathered around him. When his gaze found Elena, she saw infinite gentleness there, mixed with the satisfaction of duty fulfilled. He had done exactly what she had hoped he would do, not because she commanded it, but because he chose it. The ship's intercom crackled to life as Captain Morrison's voice echoed through the corridors. Attention all passengers and crew. We have received confirmation that the hegemony vessels are no longer a threat. Their crews are alive but unconscious, and their ships are broadcasting automatic distress signals. Colonial defense vessels are en route to provide assistance and investigate this unprecedented situation. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Once the colonial authorities learned what had happened here, everything would change. Keeper would become the subject of intense scrutiny, scientific study, and probably political maneuvering. The quiet life she had imagined for them on Kepler 442c was already slipping away. Elena. Keeper's voice came through speakers positioned around his throat, artificially generated but somehow perfectly expressive. It was the first time he had spoken in front of the other passengers, and the sound sent ripples of shock through the gathered crowd. "Yes, boy," she replied, as if they were alone in her laboratory, rather than surrounded by 300 witnesses. The ship's communication array detected several more hegemony fleets moving toward human colonies in this sector. They are targeting civilian populations on 6 different worlds. The attacks will begin within 72 hours. Dr. Webb stepped forward, his tablet forgotten in his hands. You intercepted military communications, encrypted alien transmissions. Keeper's head turned toward him with mechanical precision. Their encryption is based on mathematical principles that become transparent when examined from multiple dimensional perspectives simultaneously. Their tactical plans are quite simple. Eliminate human presence in this sector through systematic destruction of population centers. Elena felt her heart sink. The battle they had just won was only the beginning. The hegemony was planning genocide, and the colonial defense forces were scattered too thinly to mount an effective response. Thousands of families, millions of innocent people, would die while bureaucrats argued about jurisdiction and military commanders moved fleets that wouldn't arrive in time. The nearest defense flotilla is 2 weeks away, Commander Hayes said grimly. Even if we warn the colonies immediately, most of them don't have the defensive capabilities to hold off a concentrated hegemony assault. Elena looked down at Keeper, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his golden optical sensors. They both knew what needed to be done, what choice lay before them. It wasn't about programming or protocols anymore. It was about right and wrong, about protecting the innocent and standing against those who would commit atrocities. Keeper, she said softly, could you stop them? The cybernetic wolf considered her question with the weight it deserved. Not all of them, Elena, but many. I could disable their fleet communications, turn their own vessels against each other, delay their attacks long enough for help to arrive. I could save most of the people they intend to kill. And what would happen to you? She asked, though she already knew the answer. I would be far from you, Keeper replied simply. I would be alone among enemies, outnumbered by thousands to 1. The probability of my survival would be Minimal. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes as she understood the full magnitude of what he was offering. Keeper was willing to sacrifice himself, to leave her side and face impossible odds, because it was the right thing to do. Because somewhere in his titanium chest beat a heart that valued other lives above his own existence. The passenger compartment had gone absolutely silent. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, the weight of the decision being made before their eyes. "I won't order you to go," Elena whispered. "I won't ask you to leave me." Keeper's massive head lowered until his snout rested gently against her palm. "You don't need to ask, Elena. You taught me to choose. This is my choice." Commander Hayes stepped forward, his military bearing somehow softer than before. "Dr. Vasquez, if Keeper is willing to attempt this mission, I can provide him with access to military databases, tactical intelligence, anything that might improve his chances. And I can modify the ship's communication array to give him enhanced processing power," Dr. Webb added. "Create a distributed network that would let him coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously." Elena looked around the passenger compartment and saw the same determination in every face. These people, who had feared and mistrusted Keeper just hours before, were now offering everything they could to help him succeed. They understood what he represented, what his choice meant for the future of humanity in this sector of space. "You don't have to do this alone," she told Keeper. "We'll give you every advantage we can." "I know," the cybernetic wolf replied, "but some paths must be walked by one. Some choices can only be made in solitude." Elena spent the next 6 hours working frantically alongside Dr. Webb and the ship's engineering crew, modifying Keeper's systems for the mission ahead. They enhanced his quantum processors, upgraded his electromagnetic manipulation capabilities, and installed additional memory cores filled with every piece of tactical knowledge humanity had ever accumulated. But the most important modifications were the ones Elena made in private, away from the others' eyes. She carefully embedded fragments of their shared memories into Keeper's core consciousness. Quiet moments in the laboratory, walks through the research facility's gardens, evenings spent reading together in her apartment. She wanted him to carry pieces of their life with him, reminders of what he was fighting for. When the work was finished, Keeper stood before the same viewport he had shattered hours before. But this time, instead of charging into battle to save one ship, he was preparing to leave everything behind to save millions of strangers he would never meet. Elena knelt beside him one last time, her hands buried in his warm synthetic fur. "I love you," she whispered. "You are my greatest achievement, my proudest moment, my son in every way that matters. Whatever happens out there, remember that." "I will remember," Keeper replied. "I will carry your love with me across the stars, Elena, and when this is finished, I will find my way home to you." The cybernetic wolf rose to his feet and approached the viewport. This time, when he touched the transparent aluminum, it dissolved into component atoms that swirled around him like dancing stars. The effect was beautiful and terrifying, a demonstration of power that had grown far beyond Elena's original designs. Keeper paused at the threshold between ship and void, looking back at the 300 humans who had become his responsibility, his purpose, his choice to protect. "Take care of her," he said to the assembled crowd. "Take care of each other." Then he was gone, launching himself into the darkness between worlds with the repair drones formed into a tight escort formation around him. Elena pressed her face against the reformed viewport and watched until his golden optical sensors faded to points of light indistinguishable from the stars themselves. In the days that followed, reports began filtering in from across the sector. Hegemony fleets arriving at human colonies found their communications jammed, their navigation systems compromised, their weapons targeting their own ships. A few vessels managed to break through the electronic warfare that surrounded them, only to discover their hulls being systematically dismantled by swarms of what appeared to be modified maintenance drones. The attacks that should have claimed millions of lives instead became confused retreats. Hegemony commanders found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't understand. Ship after ship was disabled and left drifting, their crews unconscious but alive. Elena monitored every report obsessively, searching for signs of Keeper in the chaos of electronic warfare and disabled fleets. Sometimes she caught glimpses, sensor readings of something moving impossibly fast between enemy vessels, electromagnetic signatures that matched his capabilities, patterns of attack that bore his distinctive tactical fingerprints. 3 weeks after he had left them, the last hegemony fleet in the sector broadcast a general surrender. Their remaining vessels jumped to hyperspace and fled back toward their home territory, carrying tales of the ghost that haunted their ships and turned their own technology against them. Humanity had won a victory that should have been impossible. 6 colonies had been saved, millions of lives preserved, and an entire alien military force driven from human space by a single cybernetic wolf and his unwavering determination to protect the innocent. But Elena felt only emptiness as she stood in her new laboratory on Kepler 442c, staring out at the alien sunset through her window. The colonists had built her a research facility, named a plaza after her, and granted her every resource she could possibly need. They understood that she was the creator of their salvation, the woman whose love had given birth to their guardian. On quiet evenings, when the twin moons rose over the colonial settlement, Elena would sit in her garden and scan the stars with the most powerful communication equipment available. She broadcast the same message every night, a simple signal that carried across the void on frequencies only Keeper could recognize. "Come home," she whispered to the cosmos. "Your family is waiting." And on a night when the aurora danced green and gold across Kepler 442c's sky, when Elena had almost given up hope of ever seeing her guardian again, she heard it. A faint signal responding from somewhere among the stars. The message was brief, transmitted in a code only the two of them knew. But it filled Elena's heart with joy and brought tears of relief streaming down her face. "On my way home," Keeper's signal said. "Mission accomplished. The innocent are safe." Elena looked up at the stars and smiled, knowing that somewhere in the vast darkness between worlds, her greatest creation was keeping his promise. Her guardian was coming home to the family that loved him, to the woman who had given him the freedom to choose his own path and had watched with pride as he chose to be a hero. The galaxy had learned something important in those weeks of chaos and conflict. It had discovered that artificial intelligence wasn't humanity's replacement or its doom. It was their partnership, their extension into the cosmos. Their hope for a future where love and technology could create guardians who would stand watch over the innocent and ensure that no one would face the darkness alone. And in a small research facility on a distant world, Dr. Elena Vasquez prepared to welcome home the son who had chosen to save the universe because she had taught him that love was worth fighting for.